I'm Will. This is James from the Green Party, co-leader. Previous, is it still previous climate change minister?
I'm currently the climate change minister. Okay. And then we will see what the election holds.
Yes. Sure. So you wouldn't have driven one of these, have you?
Well, this is a Leaf.
A Nissan Leaf, yeah.
I have not driven a Nissan Leaf.
Excellent, right. So
I have a Hyundai Ioniq.
Put your foot on the brake and then press the power button.
That's the power button. That's what I was looking for.
Yep. I organised the event at EV City that you came down to a while ago.
Yes.
Last election, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, it was a good night.
And we did it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll always be very grateful to Michael Wood for having picked that up. Because it's been phenomenally successful.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So successful.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's one of the things that the biggest pushback I see against the clean car rebate is the idea that it's a subsidy for the rich, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to recognizing that like it flows on and it helps support the industries that are going to be the ones that turn the cars on for New Zealand. But what would your main pushback for that argument be?
They're like, oh, it's a subsidy for rich people. But I mean, the thing that, and that's just, you know, National Party talking points really, because only rich people ever bought new cars in the first place. Yeah, yeah. Everybody else buys second hands, and it doesn't apply to second hand cars. Yeah. So in some ways, it's only a fee for the rich people, right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So you've been driving an Ioniq for a while now?
6 years.
6 years, nice.
Yep.
Yeah. Done any good road trips with it?
Yeah, I've taken it to Whakatane.
Oh yeah.
Because my aunt lives there, and Annabelle and I go up there every summer for the recess. So we go up for about 3 weeks.
Nice.
And that's when you really challenge the kind of charging network, right? Because it's travelling during peak. Yes. You know, the summer holidays, when everybody who has an EV also does exactly the same thing. And so that's the one time I think when it really
pushes it.
Yeah, it really pushes that. But if you plan it well, then it's fine.
So one of the green policies is about EV infrastructure. Yeah. So do you want to talk about, so you've got two, you've got supporting the councils to install on-street chargers, but then also continuing to do rapid charging infrastructure throughout New Zealand.
Yes, we are, and that's really important. I mean, the main thing that we're actually campaigning on at this election is the clean power payment, and that is to households who want to retrofit for things like rooftop solar, tearing out the gas appliances and replacing them with electrics, but it also covers installing smart chargers for your car in your garage. Right, yeah. And that's because the vast majority of people, the vast majority of time, will be charging at home. They won't be out on State Highway 1. So we obviously need, to be electrifying the intercity network. But I think it's something like 90 to 95% of trips are less than 20 kilometres a day, and they're to and from work and home, right? Obviously. And so the really important thing actually, we think, is to ensure that people are charging at home. And then also, if you're installing smart chargers, then of course that becomes part of our grid, right? So you can do all sorts of awesome stuff there. So your smart, what's the policy called? It's called the Clean Power Payment.
Yeah. Excellent. So that is $6,000 for greenifying your house.
It's a $6,000 grant. Yeah. But also you can extend it with a $30,000 interest-free loan. Interest-free loan. Yeah, which you can then pay back through rates. So so it becomes attached to the property rather than to the person, which means, if you're paying it back over 10 years or whatever, and you happen to sell your house in that time, then the new homeowner will then pick that up through their rates as well, because they're getting the benefit of it.
And that also includes solar as well, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah, that's really important, because so what we want to do is we want to get to 30% of our homes having solar on the roofs, which is what Australia currently has. Right. And if we get to that, then that's enough power to displace the Huntly power station. Right. Which is massive. Yeah.
So then we can say goodbye to the coal.
Goodbye to coal and gas. Yeah. And that's really important.
Just looking at some of these other policies, you've got $300 million for new electric buses and 100% electric urban bus fleet by 2030.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk me through any of the... Is there anything beyond that, or is that pretty much just electric buses make sense, let's do it?
Yeah, pretty much, and it does, right? But obviously, it's a very big capital cost, but very low running costs, right? So it really helps councils and bus operators to bring down their operating expenses when they get off petrol, diesel, and into electricity. But they do find the upfront cost, both of the vehicle, but also of getting the depots electrified and so on and so forth. So that's that. In fact, that's harder than the buses themselves, right? So does we basically want to assist.
$300 million include setting up charging infrastructure for buses?
It'll help with that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And do you think, like, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but is that cost neutral, or how have you looked at that in terms of like what you're paying up front is covered for by the savings on?
No, it's not. So that'll come out of the climate emergency response fund. So it'll be paid for essentially by polluters through what they pay through the emissions trading scheme.
Yeah.
And the whole point of recycling that revenue that we get from the emissions trading scheme is to decarbonise the economy.
Right. So you're taking that payment that's made from polluters to then reduce carbon in the way of the public transport.
Yeah, that's right. And that's because, I mean, we are only really at the start of this journey, right? I mean, pollution is starting to come down consistently, which is really good. But because it's the first kind of wave of the economy, the upfront cost is really high.
Yes.
But somebody's got to do it.
Yes.
Otherwise, you never get the scale to bring the costs down. So there is a bit of a barrier to overcome initially, and I don't think it'll be necessary a few years from now. But but we do have to put some effort in to get started.
So that's a great place to pivot to the clean car rebate.
Yes.
Which is currently running. Good.
Yes.
Congratulations on getting that off the ground.
Thank you.
Would have been in place 3 years earlier if
Yes.
Winston Peters hadn't been
acting
as a handbrake.
Yeah.
Looking at terms of the effect that has had, what you're doing is the same thing for buses. You're making it easier to pay for the bigger costs now.
Yes.
Those costs will come down.
Yeah.
That industry will be supported. And the Greens want to continue the clean cars.
We absolutely do. It is wildly successful. It's wild. In fact,
you want to talk about the successes of it?
Yeah. Well, look, it's the single most effective climate policy that we've introduced at all, right? So
in terms of emissions saved?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's something like 3.5 million tons so far, and that's, not inconsiderable. Before the clean car discount, something like 2 in 100 new cars sold in this country were EVs.
Yes.
In June, it was 1 in 2.
1 in 2, wow.
Right, so we went from 2 in 100 to 1 in 2.
Just with that one policy.
Just with that one policy is astonishingly successful. In fact, I think, you don't quote me on this, but I think in July or August, it was 67%.
Wow.
And that's EVs. It's not even that's not even hybrids, right?
Yeah.
So it's doing the job that we intended for it. And it kind of demonstrates a couple of things. One of which is that, people have gotten over their range anxiety or the other barriers to uptake. It says people respond to incentives, right? It also says people want to do the right thing. Like they want to, one of the most common questions I get when I'm out and about is, what can I do to make a difference? What's the biggest thing I can do at home? Transport is the thing that makes the biggest difference, right? And so when they hear the government go, this is the thing that makes the biggest difference, and we're making it easier for you,
it sends a signal.
And people are doing it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, obviously, the EV community is in favour of the scheme. It's been a little a little bit rough in terms of some of the sort of flow-on effects, but overall, in terms of helping send that signal of like, yes, this is good, you can do it.
Yeah.
And putting that perception in people's minds of like, oh, like it's going to be, there's some money attached to it, so then I'm going to make that step. That's been really helpful. I just wonder if you could talk about, do you know any of the emission figures in terms of like how many emissions like our transport sector is responsible for, or our like the EVs?
Well, so I'll talk in kind of rough terms, right? Transport is the sector of the economy where our emissions have kept on going up.
Right.
So across the economy, generally, since about 2005, our emissions have stayed roughly static. Now, that's quite good news in one sense, right? Because the economy has grown and the population has grown since 2005 a lot.
Right, so we have been achieving efficiencies.
We've been achieving efficiency. But what that means is we're actually, back in 2005, we decoupled emissions growth from economic growth.
Right.
That's a very good thing. The problem is that our emissions didn't come down at all, and that is what they're now doing. But since 2005, our transport emissions kept growing. So that was the one sector which just kept going up and up and up and up and up. And now that is starting to come. That's starting to come down, and so that's a really good thing, because it was that part of the economy that was really
one of the main things that people complain about with that scheme is that it's supposed to be cost neutral, but so far I understand there has been more taxpayer money put into it than
there hasn't. Well, we suspected that would certainly be the case at the beginning. I mean, frankly, I would describe it as a high quality problem,
right?
Because the idea is that the fees on the most polluting vehicles would pay for the subsidy on the most efficient vehicles, or the zero-emission vehicles. The fact that people are buying more zero-emission vehicles than high-polluting vehicles is a really good thing.
Success.
It's a huge success. And the money that's the public subsidy, so to speak, that's going in is all coming out of the emissions trading scheme, which is paid for by polluters.
Right. Yep.
So it's still polluters paying for decarbonisation, right? It's not taxpayers who are paying for it. So that's a very good thing. Yeah.
And I mean, I guess the other argument that people say is like, is the government supposed to be paying $8,000 towards someone buying a $70,000 car versus someone buying a $30,000 car? What would you...
Well, remember that this applies to new cars sold that are imported into the country, and frankly, the vast majority of New Zealanders buy their cars second-hand. So, thank you.
Pikachu fans.
Yeah. So the vast majority of New Zealanders buy their cars second-hand. They don't buy new cars, and so. What we're doing is we're really basically trying to incentivize the people who have always bought new cars to buy electric new cars.
I guess in terms of when you give someone an incentive, you're trying to promote behaviour.
Yes.
It's pretty cheap for the government to say, we're going to give you 10% of this price and you're going to provide the other 90%.
Yeah.
So in the case of an $8,000 discount on a $7,000 car, that person's still putting up $62,000.
Yes, they are. I mean, we're not here to buy cars for people, right?
Yeah.
that's not the point. The point is to shift the fleet. Yes. And so the incentive needs to do just enough to do that. One of the things I found really interesting, of course, is that there are a bunch of car companies that took the prices of their cars down from like $80,000-$90,000 to get them under the cap. And so you're actually in effect then getting a double subsidy, right? Because for example, I think Tesla knocked something like $8,000 or $9,000 off the price to get it down to the cap, and then you got an $8,000 thing. So that's like double your money, right?
So it works really well.
It works really well. It works really well. And so the flow through effect of that will eventually be into the second-hand market.
Right.
In the government, for example, so the government's car fleet, generally our rules, the guidance across government departments was you hold on to your fleet vehicles for 5 years and then you move them into the second-hand market. That got changed to 3 years, and we're buying EVs, right? So about 15% of the public service fleet now is EV, which is 10 times the rate of the general population, which is great. And we're only holding on to those vehicles for 3 years. So we're moving those through. We're using our kind of purchasing power to move those through into the second-hand market. So you will see increasingly
more available cars,
with only 3 years on the clock. Moving into the second-hand market, which is, of course, where the vast majority of New Zealanders get their cars.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I was looking through the EV policies, and you guys have actually got the most comprehensive electric vehicle policies.
Of course we do.
Of all the parties. I was just scrolling through, it's just there's like 10 policies here. So
have you met the Green Party before? Yeah.
This is one of the things I'm fascinated by. So you have in your policy that you want to make charging stations safer for people to use, so that there's good lighting, so that they are in areas that aren't isolated.
Yeah.
That's not an issue I've heard anyone else talk about.
Yeah.
It's all incredible.
Well, it's just, I mean, these are places where, you know, you may be spending some time, and we want people to feel safe and secure in order to encourage their use, right? And I don't think that it's a particularly difficult thing to do.
Street charging.
Yeah.
Helping local councils do street charging. So biggest barrier for people that don't own their own homes is having a place to charge the EV.
Yeah.
Wellington has had some great success of providing on-street charging. No other councils that I know of have done that to that extent.
Well, that's because Wellington has the lowest rate of off-street parking. So, from memory, 85% of New Zealand homes have off-street parking. In Wellington, it's 15%.
Right.
So the ratio is reversed in Wellington from pretty much the entire rest of the country. So Wellington City Council, which is, you know, really strong on climate change and decarbonisation, has been kind of grappling with a set of circumstances that they have that basically nowhere else in the country has.
So we are going to see more of that, though, with intensification. So in Christchurch, we are seeing lots of houses go in that have communal parking or don't have parking at all. There'll be people that will be living in those houses that will need an EV because public transport doesn't work for their needs.
Yes.
And is there any specifics in the green policy for helping that happen?
There are. It's mostly to do with building regulations.
Right.
So, and actually Christchurch, of course, there's obviously more building going on here post-earthquake than pretty much anywhere else in the country. I mean, Auckland, there's a ton of construction going on there. But if you could set a requirement in your building code that says that you either need to install chargers or at the very least make them what we would call EV ready.
Yes.
So, you know, make sure you've got the ducting and all of that kind of stuff in there to make it really easy to install, even if you don't make that installation choice originally.
Is that something that could be part of the renters, you know...
The pledge to renters?
Yeah, pledge to renters. Like, if you're renting a house and you want an EV charger and your landlord's like, tough cookies and not doing it...
Well, you know, the clean power payment that I was telling you before, that obviously helps if you own your property. But there's always been what we call the split incentive problem for rental accommodation, which is that the renter pays the power bill and the landlord would have to pay for the capital cost.
Yes.
So there's no incentive for the landlord to do up the house to put solar panels on the roof or a smart charger in, because they don't pay the power bill, right? So what we've said is that those improvements will be tax deductible for the landlord, right? And then what that means is that they get the tax break, so they get the incentive, and then
they increase the capital value of the property.
Increase the capital value of the property, and the renter pays a lower power bill as a result. And it means that, you know, that then if smart charging is one of the things that goes in there, then the tenant benefits from that.
That's wonderful. All right, I'm not going to ask you all about these because there's a few of them, so I'm just going to rattle off your policies. This is fantastic.
Right.
The Greens have support for smaller and lighter vehicles, including new road user charges, weight thresholds for lower cost for lighter vehicles. You want to introduce a quadricycle category of vehicle. I know a lot of people in the EV community would love to get those mini EVs in from China and Japan, and currently you can't register them legally on the road. You have support for zero emission planes, ships and trains, which is fantastic. Going back to the chargers accessibility, you want to make sure that EV chargers are accessible. So as well as making them safe for people, you also want to make them accessible. So that's really good. You've got supporting bulk EV procurement for business and charitable organisations. So I imagine that looks like some sort of central purchasing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of different ways that you can do that, but we're already experimenting that in government where, you know, like we say, our government agencies have been directed to buy new vehicles, and they are. And then what we're saying to the private sector is, hey, well, we've just put in an order for 500.
Do you want to get on this?
You know, how big is your fleet? Well, it's 50 cars. Should we just add that to our order?
That's great.
So we can do things like that. But yes, it is really about getting MB to facilitate that kind of peer-to-peer activity within business. Yeah. Because it's you know, frankly, that's where you start to get some scale.
That's fantastic. All right, second last question. RUC exemption. Currently, EVs are exempted from road user charges. What does the Greens plan to do about that?
So we always said that we would bring the RUC back when EVs hit 2% of the fleet, and it's not quite there yet. And I know, like I said, there's massive numbers of new cars coming into the fleet, that's great, but the fleet's 4.2 million vehicles, right? So we're not quite at that tipping point yet.
So it was actually the National Party that said, let's make it 2%. So you're saying the National Party, hey, listen to yourselves?
Well, actually, I should say that because they say they're going to get rid of the RUC exemption immediately, even though it hasn't gotten to 2% yet. So they need to just maybe
listen to Simon Bridges.
Remember what they said. That's right.
Listen to Simon Bridges.
Come back, Simon Bridges, all is forgiven.
We need you.
Yeah.
That's great. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll ask you this because I asked the same of Raf. Climate change. What's your? It is bad, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's your takeaway for people that buy an EV? A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them do care about climate change. It's one of the main reasons why people do buy EVs.
Yeah, it is.
What would your message be for them in terms of why they would want to vote green?
Well, I mean, they probably have gotten the benefit of the clean car discount. National and ACT want to get rid of that, and so they want to make EVs more expensive and diesel vehicles cheaper. And so that's not going to do anything for climate change at all. It's going to make it harder for us as a country to bring down the pollution that we put into the atmosphere. And I would say that the Green Party is the party, and I think we've demonstrated this over the 6 years that it's been in government, that takes climate change most seriously, and we put policies in place that are about helping people to do the right thing.
No, that's great. I thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Also want to say I watched your speech at the Climate COP27.
Oh, yeah.
Really appreciate having someone that's in there from our government putting pressure on other countries to also move faster on climate.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your work. Cool. All right. That's us. Thanks a lot.
See ya.